Okay, welcome back to our afternoon session in regards to the budget for 2021. My understanding is the Madam Clerk does have a motion she would like to read before we continue. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I do, through you, Mr. Warden. It's just regarding the economic and tourism budgets that we just discussed. The proposed motion reads that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve an addition of $11,300 to the 2021 budget for the Date Our County initiative.
Okay, you heard the motion. Any questions or comments? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion?
Oh, sorry. First, do I have a mover and seconder?
Oh, my apologies. Yep, moved by Councillor Landry, second by Councillor McGillis. All in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Thank you. So I believe we're going to, if we're following the thing, it's office complex. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Warden. As I mentioned earlier, the responsibility for the building transferred over to Transportation and Planning Services. So with your indulgence, I'll turn it over to Mr. Don to go through that budget.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Don.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to share my screen and get myself sorted out here. So thank you. Yes, and I apologize. I'm not going to do nearly the justice that Helen used to do with this section. So forgive me in advance for this delivery. The corporate administration building budget is really to provide the ongoing maintenance and capital improvements here at 26 Pitt Street. It's a relatively straightforward budget in terms of what it consists of. There's revenue, obviously, and expenses. The revenue really comes from the lease revenue we get from our rental and from building reserves, which have been strategically built through the years by council in the past. And we do have really three main categories of expenses that we deal with, which is essentially wages, the operating costs for the building, and then capital improvements here at the complex. Revenue for 2021, and just as a note, similar to Tim, you've got your budget report that talks about 2020 variances and accomplishments. So I'm not going to focus on that. Certainly, if there's questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. But I'm really focusing on the 2021 budget and what we have revenue, expenses, and changes compared to previous years. So revenue in 2021, we are continuing on with our rent from Catering to Kids, which is using the commercial kitchen located in our former jail. We are taking some money from our reserves this year, and that is to be used to offset the cost of reshingling the roof, which I'll talk about as a capital expense later on. At the end of taking that reserve out this year, we will have an estimated balance within our reserve for this building alone at about $560,000. For the expense side of things for this building, we have wages and benefits for one staff person who essentially functions as our building maintenance coordinator here, looking after repairs, small capital works, and then some of the maintenance that takes place around the building. We do have included in our budget a budget for a summer student this summer, and the summer student really helps us out with landscaping, mowing, and some of those odd jobs that you need a second set of hands or just a little extra, an extra person around to help out with some odds and ends that we work on. On the operating expenses side of things, as you can probably appreciate, this building comes with the typical type of operating expenses that a building of this nature would normally see. We have cleaning, we have supplies that we need throughout the building, taxes, insurance, heating, and also with our elevator, our generator, our fire and security systems, we have to do ongoing monitoring and maintenance and testing of those things. Continuing on with operating expenses, we do include some minor repairs in our operating expense. This year, we are planning to do a repair to the cannon base that's out front. If you would have noticed over the past, in summer of 2020, the front axles of those cannon bases have just kind of let go over time, and those do need to be replaced. We have some flooring replacement we're going to be doing downstairs in our basement. We do have a scheduled AC replacement in the court services building, and of course, thinking of COVID, we're going to try and make sure that the work we're doing is, consistent and following best practices for, the world we're living in now. And then some minor fix-ups to the front stairs. Other projects we're looking at too, for instance, I'll back up a little bit here. We are looking at a labeling, doing some electrical labeling because we have a bunch of electrical panels around the building, and we just want to do a better job of making sure our panels are properly labeled and we have our circuits identified. Big work we're planning in 2021 is the reshingling of the roof, and I'll show you a video. This is drone took this back in 2018, so you can kind of see the condition of it, and that was already two plus summers ago, and we were missing tabs already on those shingles. And as anybody knows who owns a roof, when it starts to look like that, it deteriorates pretty fast. So we're at the point where that roof does need to be reshingled, and that's planned for 2021. It's a $60,000 expense that we have budgeted. In terms of options that for council's consideration, we could scale back some of those minor repairs that I mentioned to try and save some thousands of dollars here and there. One of the things we are looking at, and we will bring back to council if we think it's worth investigating a little bit further, is not only just replacing with asphalt shingles, but looking at a steel roof. But what we would do if we did decide that that was the right approach to take with this building is we'd be taking that from reserve, so the net budget wouldn't change, just more. We would recommend pulling more from reserves. And so council, another option that council has with respect to this building is increasing or decreasing the use of reserves depending on how if they feel it's appropriate. So with that, I will stop sharing and open up for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Don. I do have a question from Councillor Byfelds and then Councillor Laundrie.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Dan, I'm glad you brought up the possibility of having a steel roof. That was a comment I put in my little sticky on the council documents that I know that looking at steel is expensive and there's various styles of steel that you can use, but that's a historic type building, and I think the opportunity to look at different kind of finishings is good. I certainly would entertain that you bring a council report back on not just your standard steel, but possible steel shingles, whole 9 yards, and then we as council can make a decision on which way to go. But it's a classic building in downtown Cornwall. I know it's in downtown Cornwall, and there's some that think it needs to be out in SDG, but it is where it is, and just putting shingles back on it, I think, is not looking really forward very far. So my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laundrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't, because I hear myself. Okay, now. Here, I'll go through, Jim, so 1 second. Yep. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, so I won't take much on same kind of question I was going to relate as Councillor Byfeld. I was just curious to see when was the last roof, what we're looking at from your drone, the pictures, what year was that, did that take place, or did that go on?
Yeah, you know what? I don't have that information. I will make sure I include that whenever we come back with some options for council, just to have an idea. I don't think it's been done in my time here at the county, and I'm 12 years at the county, so it's it's probably in that 15 to 20 year life that you'd expect from the 3-tab shingle.
Again, I believe that when you say 15, we all like to be looking at steel would be valuable, and the fact that the type of building it is and where it is, that I would strongly love to see a report back so we can make that wise decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm just trying to remember where we left off with the possible expansion of the county's building into the jail building, and yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Mr. Don.
Yeah, thank you. So we are that was part of the COVID funding that the county has been I guess made available to the county. So all of that COVID funding is not showing up in kind of our standard budgets because it's above and beyond. So that's what we are, the work right now, we're going through the design phase, and then we were going to come back to council once we had a better understanding through that design phase, how much that cost would be. But the intent has been that we'd be using the COVID funding to the greatest extent possible to help support the physical distancing that we'd be looking at to be able to move staff into those areas of the building.
And I'm just wondering if we're going to be able to get a tour of that at some point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the comments I had made when we were talking about the COVID funding and using it for the design is to actually have a really good discussion with council in terms of what its long-term vision is for that area, because that's something that, you know, as stewards of this building and how we want to invest in it, we've got to make some decisions very soon in terms of where we want to go with that part of the building. So absolutely, it's part of that.
Great, thanks a lot.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Wharton and I think Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Warden, thank you. I concur with Councillor Byvelds. I think that we definitely need to examine the cost of steel. I think it's worth the extra money to invest, and it'll never have to be dealt with again if it's done properly during our lifetime. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe Councillor Armstrong, you did have your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Warden, thank you. Yeah, and the people who hold the radical idea that the government of SDG should reside within the SDG geographically. I know it's an insane thought, but to consider. But I also realize that when we own a property, it should be taken care of, and it shouldn't be allowed to become derelict. And these days, with the lifespan of asphalt-related materials, it behooves us very much to look into steel. I wouldn't quite go so far as to Councillor Warden and say that it's worth the money, because we don't know what the money is yet. But I would certainly like to see what the comparisons are and perhaps other materials that are available. Because 25-year shingles certainly aren't lasting 25 years, and you don't want to end up paying twice over the course of a lifetime. But it's still, I will still retain, and I know I'm not the only one that again, having a government within SDG that presides over SDG is not a radical idea. The opposite.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Don, I think you got direction in regards to what you need to come back with at a later date. Okay, thank you. So we'll move to police services. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'll just share my screen here. So it's on, I'll be referring to the information on page 36. So obviously, as we know, the hugest component of the policing budget is the contract we have with the OPP. Over 99%, in fact, is driven by that contract cost. We did get, you'll note under the expenses, the contract decreased by about 45,000. 747, and that's a result of the reconciliation. Under the contract, there's two components of the overall contract cost. It's based on a fixed provincial cost, which is the cost of maintaining that provincial infrastructure, apportioned based on our population as well as calls for service. So it's gone down because our rolling average of calls for service over the last couple of years has dropped. So we're seeing a slight decrease in the overall contract cost, which is good. And you know, for anyone who's been on county council for any length of time, and there's a few of you, you'll recall that the billing model that we have now is far superior to the previous billing model that we had, which was arbitrary across the province. Now it makes a lot more sense. And in fact, we've, I believe when I started, the OPP contract was around $13 million. So, I mean, that's 10 years ago now. So certainly that it's a much fairer system. So that's all I'll say on that. But a couple things I did want to mention on the policing budget. You know, under the RIDE program, we get a similar amount every year. We get about $16,000. And that's directly offset the cost of the RIDE programs they have throughout the year to keep our roads safe, particularly during the holiday season. You'll note under the criminal reference check fees, there's a very substantial drop in revenue. We've budgeted this year what we had last year, although the revenue was down about $60,000. Rebecca, I think, mentioned it previously, but that loss will be covered under the COVID funding that the Safe Restart money that we do have. So even though we didn't get near our target, it's certainly going to be picked up, because that's a direct result of that loss is a direct result of the pandemic that we're currently going through. The alarm fees, that was touched on earlier. That's a 3-year cycle where the funds come in year one, and then they're drawn down over the life of the program. Under the expenses, I did mention the OPP contract. Obviously, that's the biggest one. You'll note the last item, excuse me, under expenses, there's a surplus. We've drawn $120,000 out of the surplus each year for many years to reduce the cost of policing throughout the county. You'll note that there's about $31,000 shown in this year's budget. That's because we've depleted that budget, and Rebecca and I were chatting last week, I think, about the surplus, and it came, I believe it came in the early 2000s. There was a credit given to the county. I don't know the exact history of it, but it was a substantial credit in the millions, and councils used it wisely over the intervening 15 years or more to reduce the cost of policing. So that amount's being depleted this year. So we'll have to, that money from the surplus won't be there in a year, but every year going forward. But as I said, with the billing model for the contract and things like that, we've been in a positive position from a contract point of view. So that partially offsets that loss. So, and then the board, you'll see the police services board expenses, they've been reduced as well, just because of the need to have virtual meetings and reduced expenditures from attending conferences and so on and so forth. So we've reduced the budget accordingly. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on policing if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simpson. I do have a question.
Sharing the screen. Yeah.
I do have a comment or a question from Councillor Byfelds.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I will agree with CO Simpson on policing costs. When I was warden, before I was warden, we always got $1 million back, with county council always tended to spend before they got it back, and we got caught in 2010, 2011, and there was actually a $1.5 million flip that year. So that was a lot of talking between me and the former treasurer on how to deal with it, but it was dealt with, and I certainly appreciate that policing costs have come more in line to reality. The only comment I will make is that that I hope that we're not saving on the police services budget to have less police present in SDG. Not only myself, but local residents, whether in South Dundas or wherever, are making comments that the police presence isn't what it used to be, and yeah, it isn't like it was when we were kids, because there was 10 police officers residing in the village of Morrisburg at that time, so you knew every one of them. But now you don't know who's out there except maybe one or two. The president, to see a OPP officer on the road without lights and sirens is a rare thing, and I did make some comments to Councillor McGillis and the task force that speeding is still a concern, needs to be at least looked at and reviewed. And yeah, our calls are still there, but sometimes just having a police presence around makes a difference in what local crime ends up being happening within our municipality. So comments to our two members of the Police Services Board. Keep that in mind when you're there, and I know that your chair is very strong in saving dollars, but every once in a while you got to invest dollars to make sure that the presence of police services is at a level that residents desire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thanks, Warden Prevo. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Byvelds. I think that it's twofold. I mean, obviously, we don't want a policing service that we can't afford, but I know that it seems to be a very loud and clear thing that there aren't as many, or it doesn't appear that there's as many police officers boots on the ground as there used to be. So that, and I think that's a legitimate concern. I mean, I know myself, I will tell you that when I'm out and about, maybe not so much recently, but in the last couple of years, if I called and there was an issue, very rarely would there be an officer available to attend to that call. So some concern with that. And I think too, as we get a couple of years under our belt with the mental health nurse. I think that some of those savings for other things should potentially be directed to make that position a permanent fixture and less of a donation. I think we'll find that that is a tool that will be very difficult to take away once it is used. And I think that instead of it being in the donation category, I think it seriously needs to be considered as an expense for delivering police services in SDG.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'd just like to add on to what Councillor Gardner just had to say. If we get a sample size of even the next year and the trend stays the same as what we heard this morning from our two OPP representatives, two things strike out to me. Being a reaction, but it lends my thinking towards the fact that this mental health nurse should be a permanent fixture. Even as I said earlier, even if they get a different line of funding, perhaps they may feel that a second one is availability to what Councillor Williams was, Councillor Smith, I think, was asking. They may find that there is a benefit to it, but also the second thing that strikes me is the amount of hours that they are saving, which is no cost to us, but the amount of hours they're saving just in hospital visits and staying at the hospital, in fact, it should in fact lead to more availability for some of these officers. So just as a byproduct, we should have more of a presence, a police presence, because they're saving an hour and a half per visit. I'm not sure, we didn't see the stats of how many visits each week they do, but that could potentially be, 6-7 hours worth of more policing that they can be doing out in the field, which is a wonderful byproduct. So I think it's very positive all around. I do agree with the first premise that Councillor Byveld's brought up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make sure our two members that sit on the police board bring those comments back to the board over the next year and put that hopefully into their budget for 2022. Okay, not seeing any other questions or comments. We'll move into was there anything else, Tim, on police services? No?
No, Mr. Warden, I think we've covered that. So I believe at this point we'll be moving into library services, Mr. Warden.
Yep. Library services, yeah, thank you. Mrs. Franklin.
Thank you, Warden Prevost and Council. And those of you who know me know that I could talk about the library all day long. We would have had to start much earlier and finish much later. But Warden Prevost has wisely advised me to please try to keep it a bit brief, which I will do. I'll do my best. And this is my first time sharing, by the way, so bear with me. I hope I've got it. Okay. I would also, before I get too far along, I'd like to thank my senior management colleagues in preparing the 2021 estimates. And I'd like to thank the library board, both those members who are on council and our publicly appointed members. This is very much a collaborative effort, getting all of this put together and discussed and realizing what's, what the priorities are. 2020 did present many challenges to us at the library, and we are definitely public facing. So there were challenges both at our administration office and with branch closures. We did a lot of work working on the health and safety concerns that dealing directly with the public brings with it. What may not have been overlooked somewhat is that we also, in 2020, we implemented a new ebook platform and a new discovery overlay for our online catalog. So learning these technologies and others as well, of course, associated with learning how to deliver services virtually, were big deals for us. So I also want to mention that our budget process was two-phased, or the library board addressed budget in two different times. I will explain that in a couple of slides. But I also, before I go any further, I do want to give my respects and acknowledge the work that Jim Bancroft did for us. He was at our first library board budget meeting back in October. He definitely held us to account, but he was very supportive, and he fully supported the estimates that were initially deliberated upon. And over the time that Jim was on the board with us, I found him to be a true supporter, advocate, and champion of the library, and I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to work with him. Okay, so if you thought you were going to get away with me not promoting the library, you were wrong. This is a good catchphrase about what we bring to the table, what we bring to the community. Throughout the pandemic, the SDG Library has found many ways to engage with our members of all ages and to help our residents to access information and recreational outlets, often in ways that have never been done before, because we had never had the need to learn how to deliver everything virtually. I'm very, very proud of the library and of my colleagues' accomplishments. And their continued desire to try out new ways of offering services out of necessity, as we see currently, but also to be an active part of this important community ecosystem. So I mentioned before about the two different budget meetings that we held. The first one held on October 22nd.
Karen, can I interrupt?
I'm sorry?
Can I interrupt for a second? I'm not sure if are you going off a screen expecting us to see that screen, because we're not seeing it.
Oh, you're not seeing that screen?
No, I wasn't sure if you were.
I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wasn't sure if you were reading something and then get it.
Hold on. Yeah. Thank you. Hold on. I'll see if I can pull up my. Okay. Okay, got that. There we go. Okay. Is that better?
No.
Thank you. You've got that?
No.
You're still not seeing that? Hold on a sec here. I should be, hold on, sorry. In slideshow, I'm sharing.
Your report's getting shorter.
No, this is my way of making it longer, sir. Okay, you okay with that?
So
I'm going to bring us to the slide I'm working on. Have you got it there?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for interrupting me. Okay, so our first meeting was on October 22nd, and at that time we had branches that either had just reopened or were even still partially closed, and there were many unknowns still at that time. For example, we didn't know whether we had an archives intern, which we were only getting if we were successful in receiving a grant. We had not done a lot in purchasing our capital or print collections because they weren't going to be available to our patrons. And there were several projects that were planned but couldn't be executed because of COVID. So in our revenues, which you see on your screen now, that included the same provincial funding or operating grant that we've received for well over 20 years. This has been a topic of some discussion about whether, that can change. There are hints that it may change in the future, but I'm not budgeting on the promise of that. And it also included $50,000 from existing library surplus, which had been identified in our 2019 audited financial statement. Our fees and fines revenues that we were projecting for 2020 I would say are still somewhat optimistic, because the board has approved that we are waiving fees and fines during the pandemic because we have to quarantine materials when they're returned to the library. And we're also trying to discourage people from making special trips to the library just to make sure their books get back on time. Second graph, which is the second column you see there, it included that. Sorry, I should back up a bit. The second draft was as a result of at our regular meeting on January 14th, and the Director of Financial Services Treasurer, she presented some information to us with some recommendations on changes that we could make to our budget. So that second draft included anticipated postage reimbursement from the province and almost $21,000 added to the reserves transfers. $6,900 from additional funding that we did receive for the archives intern. And that money we did receive turned out to be at a higher level or higher than what we had originally thought we were going to get. Instead of funding us at 50%, they're funding us at 85%. And then we added $14,000 that we realized as of January were 2020 special projects that were not going to be completed. Okay. The next slide being the expenses, and again we see the first column is from October, and the second column was from January. So the changes were recommended by the Director of Financial Services were to add wages for the archives intern that would be offset by increased grant funding, and I mentioned that was at 85%, and to remove $11,500 for that third self-checkout system, which I mentioned earlier in our regular meeting, as remaining social service relief funds could be used to purchase an additional system. We also removed just over $3,000 from facilities costs because of the recent implementation of the VoIP system here at Admin. Branches still are operating with Bell Canada services, and we haven't gone VoIP at branches at this point. Okay, so the budget impact. Overall, the draft number 2 that you saw previously represents $17,600 in increased revenues and $6,400 in reduced expenses, for an overall of $24,000 reduced from our first draft to the final budget estimate being presented here today. That includes $26,200, I guess, in transfers from reserves, which I've mentioned are the unused 2020 special projects monies, $6,700 for the archives intern, and $3,500 from our furniture reserves. It also it includes $3,800 in additional grant revenue coming from for the archives intern, and we're adding to the budget estimates, and this is really directly hoping to impact public satisfaction and public access. Is we're adding a video streaming service called Canopy. It'll be about $4,000 a subscription price, but it allows our users to log in as they would if they were going to borrow an ebook, for example, and download films. Very high quality, some independent films, a lot of Canadian films. And this is something that we really felt was missing in the early parts of 2020 when we could not lend out videos, for example. We're seeing a $19,500 increase in our collections estimates. This really just reflects higher print material costs and our continued development of our digital collections, because we have seen that they are most appreciated and being very well used by our members of the public. And we have $15,400 increase to our budget furniture, because we want to complete the Iroquois branch refurbishment, new shelving, and some of the final things that we've got the shelving, but with some of the final pieces of furnishing that would finish that project. We want to start to replace the shelving at Long Sioux branch, and we need to purchase some new workstations at both our Winchester and Chrysler branches. And our special projects for 2021 are to include the continuation of our Maker Lab project, and of course to celebrate the library's 50th anniversary. So, budget options. I figured I might as well take advantage of the opportunity to maybe make a little plug, even though I will say that I have to be open and say that the estimates you see before you have been approved by the library board, along with the amendments recommended at our January meeting. So we could, if the council chose to, we could increase our program estimates by $1,000 just to add a little bit of enhancement support for our 50th anniversary events. We could increase our database subscriptions by about $6,000. And this would be directly to resubscribe to the Consumer Reports database, which we did cancel in 2020 in order to reduce our budget impact in 2020. You might remember there was quite an increase there, so we wanted to try to reduce that impact a bit. So it is not widely used, but it is valued by those who do use it. And finally, we could use any of our additional surplus from 2020 to help offset the overall budget increase. And with that, I will stop sharing if I absolutely can do that. There we go. And open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you. Short presentation.
I tried my best.
I'm kidding. I'll open it up to any questions or comments from members of council. Councillor Wirt.
Thank you, Karen. Through you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Karen, for the presentation. And my comments will be brief. I certainly feel that any asks that Karen is supporting this year in regards to extending programming should be supported. I certainly think that COVID has done nothing to enhance the quality of life of a lot of our citizens. And if they can obtain some extra benefits by these small gestures that are being asked for, I think that they should be supported. So, and well done, Karen, on the job. Lots of positive comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wirt. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Fraser.
I had to jump in to support Karen and her efforts, and Karen and the whole crew. And as a sitting member of the library board, along with Councillor Warden and you, Mr. Warden, who else we have? Mr. Landry, Councillor Landry. I hope I speak for all of us, but Karen, your efforts and the efforts of staff, and to Councillor Wirt's contention that which I believe is an assertion of the need to have a good library service, library buildings and programs within our community is so vitally important, and I as well support all that is going on in this budget. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, and I do agree, Councillor Fraser. I think you did speak on behalf of the members of the board, so thank you for doing that. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing none. Thank you, Karen, for your report.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move to the Health and Social Services. Rebecca?
Yes, so I will share my screen. All right. So Health and Social Services. So the City of Cornwall presented their 2021 budget for shared services last month. The largest increase is related to the land ambulance costs, which was communicated at the previous council meeting. The Eastern Ontario Health Unit has confirmed that the 2020 budget will remain at 2020 levels. Their fiscal year ends March 31st. I'm sure that they are experiencing many challenges right now with COVID, so hopefully they will be able to come to a future meeting to present their 2021 budget when completed. Senior Support Center costs have remained unchanged. These costs have been constant for many years. As an option to council, I didn't want to spend too much time on Health and Social Services as we've seen the full budget last month. But as an option to council, should they wish, based on the decisions made today, there is the opportunity to use some of the tax rate stabilization reserve to help offset some of the increased costs of the shared services. So land ambulance being the highest addition at $353,000. So that is something that I wanted council to keep in mind should they wish to use the funds to offset any increases. Do I have any questions about health and social services? I didn't want to spend too much time on it because we had already heard an extensive presentation last month.
Yeah, I have one from Councillor Fraser.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And Rebecca, when you speak of the tax, I'm just gapping on the word, you just said it, to offset taxes.
Yes.
Is there still an ongoing concern with the MPAC and some of the larger facilities, industries in our area, businesses in our area, and the possibility of us having to compensate those people applying for consideration by MPAC?
I have not heard of anything yet on any changes to MPAC. So I have not included anything in the budget. I don't foresee anything. I'm assuming you were talking about the small business subclass. Is that the one that you're referring to?
No, it's it was about industrial spaces and how they were assessed improperly or felt to be assessed improperly, and they were maybe taking MPAC to task on that, and that's what I was referring to.
I haven't heard anything directly. However, it has been something that's been a challenge over the last few years. Many commercial industrial properties are doing requests for reconsiderations on assessment values. I don't hear anything directly, but it is something that could pose a challenge in future years should any major assessments be revisited and reduced, because that would be almost retro to what we've collected, and we would need to individual municipalities would need to refund those overpaid taxes with changes of assessments. But I have not heard anything to date of anything that would be critical.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay.
Okay, I have a comment from or a question from Councillor Beifels.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. It's not really a question as or a comment as being, I guess, fairly soon past here at Joint Services Liaison Committee. Had a lot of discussion in that committee, and I know Councillor Armstrong is an extremely big supporter of this, of increasing land ambulance service in SDG and not impacting the city of Cornwall at the same time. So I know it's a big increase for county council. Staff has still hadn't made it work, so I don't see any point in going to the tax rate stabilization reserve to deal with it. But it's something our residents want, require. It's something we're probably going to have to do every 5 years, a big bump up and deal with the increased request for services for land ambulance. So until we get through the big hump of the baby boomers and everybody else, it'll be what it'll be. But I certainly will thank council for supporting this and ensuring that we have the service we need.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Anything further, Rebecca?
No, that's it for health and social services. And I do believe I'm also next on the list for financial services budget.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Councillor Beifels. I agree with him in regards to the extra land ambulance. I know it was Councillor Armstrong brought it up a few times at the joint meeting with the city and in the county, so we appreciate him doing that. And I agree. I think we'll have to look at it at least every 5 years to see if we're staying status quo in regards to the service we're providing, or if we're going to have to extend it again. So, I certainly will support the land ambulance, extra land ambulance across the counties. Okay, so we'll move. If there's no other questions or comments, I don't see any. So we're going to the financial services.
Okay. All right, so I will touch on the financial services budget now. The biggest effect on revenues for financial services is based on the decline in interest income. So for many years, we were receiving a healthy interest rate on our bank balance that has a cap of $30 million. This means that we earn interest on balances up to 30 million, and anything that we have on a bank balance over that doesn't include or doesn't receive any interest. That doesn't happen very often. However, there has been occasion where we've, went around 32 million. So the prime rate is currently 2.45%. And this is quite a reduction from what we've had for many years when it was at 3.95%. So we have seen a significant decline since COVID. Since COVID started, the decline in prime rate went down significantly. I've included the use of reserves in the budget for two purposes. The HR system was a 2020 project and was recently implemented to staff in 2021. There's still work to be done, and the project was approved last year with using the modernization reserves. We didn't spend the entire amount in 2020, and I factored in the balance into 2021 to offset the $17,000 in expenses towards the project. I'm also requesting to use modernization funding to conduct a service delivery review for financial services and court services, and I'll talk about that in detail shortly. All right, so most of the remaining costs, or most of the expenses, are constant to 2020. So I just wanted to touch on the key items unless council has specific questions. The largest expense to financial services is the cost of MPAC at just over $1.1 million, which also includes a slight decrease from 2020, which is nice to see right now. Software costs include the costs of VADM, which we have now included in 2021, the North Glengarry licenses. The county currently pays for the use of VADM for most municipalities, and in 2021, North Glengarry will be coming on board, saving license costs for that municipality. I believe it was around $12,000 or $15,000. Software costs also included in the in that line item are the remaining HR software costs of $17,000 that I mentioned earlier. This will be funded by the modernization reserve. We also had a significant savings, just over $8,000 when we switched over to VoIP. So that was a nice cost savings to see. And I would like to, unless there's any questions, I'd like to move on to the service delivery review, which I'm going to be recommending.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, so the county's received $725,000 in 2019 for the purpose of creating efficiencies and modernizing services. Many municipalities and counties have used the funds for extensive service delivery reviews. However, I would like to conduct a service delivery review for financial services and court services, which are two different divisions of one department. There's been many changes over the years in the requirements for court services as well as finance. And I would like to find ways to improve the services we provide while focusing on the growth and demand of both municipal and provincial services. So both divisions serve different needs. However, there's some similarities that can be found. Oh, jeepers, sorry about that. I have to back up. So the timing of the review can be better for many reasons. So COVID has changed the way we do business and has created significant changes and challenges with operations. In order to pivot to a new reality of a digital landscape and as a response to a changing environment that we will likely not ever go back to as a pre-COVID process, I believe a review fits the criteria of the funding and will provide benefits to the department. This is just an illustration of how the services are in the two divisions, how they connect to create efficiencies, reduce costs, and streamline processes can be found. We have minimal staff. We haven't increased court staff. On the contrary, when our tickets have been reduced and employees either retired or we had one that went to South Glengarry, we haven't replaced those employees. So we have minimal staff with increasing demands. The functions of both would be best analyzed by a third party so that efficiencies can be identified from outwards looking in. So it's going to be a huge benefit to the two divisions. So the review will focus on clear objectives of how we deliver services with consideration to internal and external components, prioritizing areas of opportunities and to meet growing demands. So keep staff engaged throughout the process, use their knowledge of current and past practice, provide strategies for improvement and ways to build on our internal capacity, and to evaluate cost-saving opportunities. Mostly, I really don't believe pre-COVID processes will come back. And I really hope that we can grow with the way the new digital landscape has developed. This will be the first review conducted since the two departments merged into one, and I believe that it will have a really positive outcome. And using the modernization funding as intended is going to have some huge benefits. So that's, I didn't go through line by line on the budget. I just touched on the key components. Do I have any questions from members of council?
Okay, I'll open it up. Councillor Armstrong, did you have a question, or is that just a comment on chat?
A comment to give you a little bit of
yeah.
with dealing with Ben.
Thank you. I thought it was that, but okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I can't see everyone, so if somebody just wanted to speak up.
Mr. Warden, I have a question. It's Tim. Yeah, no, I thank you. No, I just want to Rebecca went through it quite quickly, but she did a great job covering why we feel that we should look at the two divisions of financial services, that being financial services and court services. I think it's a great, her and I have talked about it extensively over the last quite a while, and we think it's a great use of the modernization funding that the province has put forward. You know, for all the reasons she mentioned, to look at how we do things and to create efficiencies and to make sure that we're doing the best job we can going in post-COVID. So I just want to give a plug for it. You know, I support it 100%. I think it's going to be a great project, and I look forward to seeing the result. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing none. Is there anything further, Rebecca?
Not for financial services. I'm good to go on the next section when you're ready.
Okay, we're going to go right into court services. Yep, there we are. Go ahead.
All right. Okay, so I just wanted to provide council with a quick illustration of why court services is in the current state. There has been a downward trend in tickets filed by agencies for many years, and 2020 has been a challenge for court services. The reduction in tickets in 2020 has been impacted further by COVID-19, which has resulted in court closures, reduced tickets, less people on the road. Extensions have been provided for sticker renewals, driver's license renewals, and there has been defaulted fines, closures, and delays. So, and also collections activities have been minimal as well. So you can see by this graph, I went from 2006 onwards by agencies, and you can see the decline jumped quite significantly from 2019 to 2020. It's been a constant decline, but that jump was quite significant. Needless to say, revenues continue to decline as well. In 2020, we were able to use the Safe Restart funding, approximately $256,000 in revenue losses for POA. It's difficult to determine the future of court and when matters will resume to pre-COVID levels, if they ever will. Revenues and expenses in the 2021 budget are for court are largely unchanged from 2020. Many expenses are controlled by the demand of the court, such as judicial services, prosecution, and interpreter costs, as well as ICON charges, which is the provincial system, the provincial software. Expenses that remain constant are operating costs like wages and benefits, MAG monitoring, Ministry of Attorney General monitoring. That's approximately $2,000 per month. And the City of Cornwall portion of net revenues is approximately 41.7%. That's based on the municipal directory population. So with regards to the budget as a whole, the budgeted revenues for 2021 will remain the same as 2020. This is because there's no data available to guide this budget process through COVID-19. External factors such as policing agencies and MAG all play a key role in this component. Maintaining the 2020 budget, budgeted revenues and expenses provides the opportunity to use COVID funding to offset any shortfalls should the targets not be met. So we've made very minimal changes to the budget. With regards to training and development, we've reduced it about $1,600. We're doing some internal changes with notices, so we have a little bit of a reduction in some costs for supplies, office supplies, and the notices and mailings. But other than that, the change to the budget is very minimal. So that's it in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Frank, I can't hear you. Councillor Prevost, sorry.
Yep, my apologies, sorry. I don't see any on the chat for questions, but I don't see everybody again, so I'm not sure if anybody has one that they just want to speak up.
Okay.
Warden Prevo, I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. I think it's a very prudent approach that Ms. Russell has taken. I know that there's so many variables and so many different things that she's been dealing with over the court costs and that entire department. And I think taking this approach towards budgeting for the new year is probably the best tactic that could have been done. I commend you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions in regards to the court division? Not seeing none, we'll move right into, thank you, Rebecca. We'll move right into IT services. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is my third budget since I've started, and I just, like everybody else, has seen a lot of change in the past couple of years. So since I've started, we focused a lot on the IT infrastructure. We've done a lot of work with our networks, put in new Wi-Fi, voice over IP servers, backup, and data center. This year is the year that we like to shift focus to governance of our IT services, focus on project management, policy process, take a more proactive approach with our service delivery, and wrapping up some of the projects in progress, namely the website, expanding the voice over IP to remote sites across the county, and VADM online modules for the municipalities. We've also seen a change in the expectations of the IT department. So we did, in preparation for the budget, we consulted with local municipalities, and things that we've heard is that they'd like to see a more proactive approach to our services, reducing the IT work done by non-IT staff at the local level, better on-site support. So seeing us, this probably won't happen until after COVID, but spending more time on site with their systems, and expanding the digital processes and services that we offer. We've also had some requests for projects over the next year. So we're looking build on our success at the county level, moving it to the local level, namely voice over IP and network refresh, support with online services, streaming council meetings, and we're asked to help with the release of a tourism app, which I think is a really cool project. So we'd really like to shift gears this year, shift from IT systems to governance. So we really want to put resources towards developing policy process and including the local municipalities into the decisions we make moving forward as an IT service. We really want to shift from internal to external. So take our successes and implement them elsewhere, and switch from IT capital to investing in people. People and time are our most valuable resources, and that's what it's going to take to be successful moving forward. So from an IT service staffing perspective, when I first started 3 years ago, we had an IT tech, and I joined that lonely tech and doubled the size of our IT department. Since then, we've added another tech, business system analyst, and one of those IT techs actually then was promoted into an IT service coordinator, and finally we added a technology specialist. Now, this model was working quite well, and I'll just note that the business system analyst is currently vacant, so there's been additional pressures put on the rest of the team to finish up some of that work. But it also gave us an opportunity to look moving forward. So the changes I'd like to propose for IT staffing moving forward is the addition of a service desk technician, and reclassifying the business systems analyst to business system coordinator, and having a dotted line relationship between the IT tech and the business systems coordinator. Now, the service desk technician will primarily be that tier 1 support. Somebody calls into IT or sends an email. That we have a technician doing that right now, and really it's that immediate help. Somebody's can't get on or can't do their work. There'll be that first response, changing passwords, that kind of thing, and they will also triage and assign the higher level tickets. And they'll also do some tier 2 backfill and backfill for others when required. So the anticipated cost of that anticipated pay band 4. Then when we look at the current IT technician position, I'd like to realign some of those responsibilities. So that IT tech is currently mainly doing the service desk tier 1 function, but I'd like to move that position to add more value, more on-site support for local municipalities, looking at Office 365 and SharePoint, and also shifting some of their focus to be programmer analyst kind of person. And what that would do is help with the integration of our systems, develop scripts, configuration of systems, and help with the website. And the future goal would be to create a full-time programmer analyst position based on the success of that kind of foray into that world. And no change in pay band is anticipated there. And finally, I'd like to reclassify the business system analyst to business systems coordinator. Now, this person or role is really responsible for the end user success with business systems. So where we'd like to go next year is really focused on changing the way resource services are offered for municipalities, the way services are requested by the public, mainly going to more digital-based systems. And whenever change impacts the end user, that is more difficult than swapping out servers and software and that kind of stuff. So I really need to reduce the technical aspect to this position. Project management would be the primary role, and supporting the end user with implementation, training, and report development, really getting the most out of our systems. The anticipated pay band for this position would be 1 classification up from 5 to pay band 6. So the impact, if we look at the budget impact, the service desk technician is a net new position. So anticipated they would start in step 2 and pay band 4 with benefits would be a budget impact of $75,700. The IT technician is an existing position that has no impact on budget. The business systems coordinator would be a reclassification, anticipated pay band 6, step 3, with benefits at an incremental cost of $2,400. Now, some of the other things we want to look at for 2021 is to complete the website project, and this is already funded and the funds are in reserve. We're looking at expanding voice over IP at the patrol garages and library branches, and again, that has no impact on taxations from reserves. Server room move or upgrades, depending on what happens with the jail and other office space at the admin building, that is also in reserves. Now, from taxation, we're looking to fund an IT research subscription. And what this is, it's a company out of London, Ontario, that research, they have a bunch of analysts working, and they research best practices for IT and IT services. And we want to leverage this service to implement a really strong IT governance or policies and procedures. They provide you with blueprints, roadmaps, templates. So all the heavy lifting, the research is done. It's all based on best practice. You take the work that they've done and you implement it internally. And the benefit also is that you can actually have meetings and calls and guidance from these experts who actually did the research. So I think it would really accelerate our drive towards policy and governance. The other thing we would like to do is to start building an IT infrastructure replacement reserve. So for this year, we'd like to put $25,000 in this reserve, and that is for future replacement of the current servers and network infrastructure we put in place in the last couple of years. So overall, the proposed budget has a decreased expense of $90,577. But the taxation portion has increased by a bit over 88,000 just due to the change in the funding mix. So a lot of the projects we did last year were funded through the efficiency and other reserves, and this year there's less of that. So while the overall expense decreased, the taxation goes up by almost the same amount. So this would really enable the IT department to complete the ongoing projects and to deliver new projects for local municipalities. It would provide us the resources to develop and implement IT policy and procedures based on best practice, and also provides for future capital expenses. Now, just some options for you. Not funding the IT research subscription would decrease the budget by $25,000, but it would reduce our support for governance policies and procedures. Leaving staffing status quo would reduce the budget by $78,100, but again, leaving us a little short to really expand our services to provide that value add to the local municipalities. And finally, not funding the reserves would reduce our budget by 25,000, but 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it would cause greater fluctuations in our future in those budgets. Any questions? That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Can you go back to a full screen of council members, if you would, please?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up to questions or comments from members of council. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Warden Prevost. Just a quick question, Mike. I actually laud you for wanting to try and spend more time out in the municipalities and help the local IT people and get this. We've seen that we've all adapted fairly well, but there are still some hiccups, and I think unfortunately, speaking specifically of our area, there's not a lot of people for them to confer with if they're if they're stuck with something that they're working. Tony and I to speak to, well, they're not getting a lot of help, so it would be good to have that done through. But the question that I had is, were you intending to just provide that service, or would that be charged back to the local municipalities for using your staff's time to get things on board? Would it be sort of a contract bit of help, or what's that approach?
No, the approach we've taken right from the start is similar to other services in that the IT services is funded through the taxation from the local municipalities, and that any significant projects we take on should be to the benefit of all, so that one local municipality doesn't feel like they're funding something for another municipality. I think we're doing an okay job at spreading our resources and our time, but currently, we do get requests from local municipalities, and our time is not charged back. But if there was a project where you needed to buy equipment or whatever, then obviously that would be at the cost of the local municipality. But our time, we're here for everybody, and requests come in quite often, and then we try to prioritize the resources that we have being our time.
If I may, that's the approach has worked very well. Now I just have a few concerns on if we're going to start increasing and having more of a presence in each municipality. It could become a little less time effective, and it could also take away from other opportunities when if we too many of us need too much help, there may be somewhere you want to start capping it or start to take a look at that, I would think.
Sure, and I think that's where the governance will come in. So one thing that we want to start doing is having and I've talked about this before, is have a user group that is where we have representation from local municipalities. And I think our service would be driven largely by your needs, as opposed to us telling you what we're willing to offer or not willing to offer.
Okay, I'll move to Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, Mike, I think it's a great idea to be, getting into municipalities a little bit more and feet on the ground there. I'm sure that'll be appreciated. This department has, I forget what year it was initiated, but it appears that it has grown steadily since its initiation. And I think it provides a very valuable product, there's no question. I guess my concern is that a department like this could grow indefinitely, because IT is just more and more in our everyday lives all the time. And so I'm just wondering, what are the parameters of that growth, so that we know that every year we're not going to be adding another staff member and another staff member and another staff member.
That's a good point and a good question, and I think it's important for us as a department to show that value that we're adding. Just an interesting data point that I came across. while researching in the fall, a typical organization, or the sweet spot, I guess, if you will, for a tier 1 IT tech to the number of end users is about one tier 1 IT tech to about 70 to 82 end users. Right now, we're running at 1 to 200. So I think that the need severely outstrips what we can provide with our current staffing, and the future growth will be driven by the needs of local municipalities. So this growth that we're looking for this year is not for the IT core services of the county. I think we're well covered and we could do well with what we have or even less. What will drive the future is really the need of local municipalities to expand digital services or whatever they request of us. So that's where the need for future growth will be coming from.
Thank you.
Mr. Warden? Hello?
My apologies. Yep, go ahead. I was on mute.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. And thanks for that question, Councillor Williams. That's a question I had for Mike whenever we were talking about this several months ago. And, you know, I was thinking back to 2011 when I started, there was 2 IT staff, I think, as Mike mentioned. And, you know, but I did want to mention that, you know, certainly there was the Perry report that was done back in Mike 2016, around there. And it talked about, I mean, that was a snapshot in time, but it you know, it talked about staffing needs and internal and external services. And certainly, you know, this isn't exactly what was proposed at that time. And we're 5 years on and there's a pandemic and so on and so forth. But, you know, it's in keeping with kind of that strategic, you know, look at where we could go. But I think Mike's right. I mean, where we go in the future is going to be a function of what type of services are there and demand really from local municipalities. When we set this thing up a few years ago, certainly, you know, one of the big things was, you know, prior to that, we'd always kind of just looked after ourselves. And then, you know, the thought was, to Councillor Armstrong's point, it's so hard to get, you know, you can pay for it, but, you know, we should be taking a more strategic look at this thing and, you know, developing that capacity internally so it can be offered through the county levy, benefiting everybody. So that's kind of the way we've positioned this thing and moving forward. And I see this as a natural evolution, as Mike said, in the tier 1 responses, and then, you know, investing not so much in the infrastructure and the projects, which we've done a great deal of over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, but now moving those funds into the brain power that we need to really work and assist local municipalities move forward. Kind of a long-winded answer, but, you know, it was kind of the longer plan. And I mean, certainly, I'm not going to support anything that adds, you know, we're certainly not going to be bringing forward proposals to add staff every year, you know, because you know, it's got to be an incremental thing. So thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGillis.
Well, thank you, Mr. Warden. Nice to hear what you just said, Tim. I just wanted to say that as we, you know, we would make decisions here as councillors to support all SDG. We know that, but we positioned ourselves at South Stormont with our own IT. We don't really reach out to the counties for any other than the GIF mapping. We've already paid for our IT people, and things have been working out pretty well because we made that move because of security issues, and we were told that this is the best route we should take. But you know, we pay a levy towards the counties, and thinking that if they're going to add more, it's going to cost us more too. So we're paying, like, looks like we're paying double for the same service. So I don't know. I have a hard time supporting paying extra for another IT person when some of us at the municipal level are self-sustainable in terms of the IT services. If you want to comment on that, Mike, please.
Through you, Mr. Warden.
Right.
Well, the timing of this is almost unfortunate for the IT services department in the sense that I started in this position at the same time as South Stormont started looking into their own IT services. Yeah, I'd agree with you that when I started, there were issues. All I can say is I've been working very hard with my team to build a better service to plug some of those security holes that we did have. And I think that, I'm confident to say that the local municipalities that we do serve have seen an improvement in our service, and the feedback I've gotten has been very positive. So I just think it was a matter of timing where South Stormont decided to go down a different road. I wasn't in the position long enough yet to have shown any results to convince you any other way. So I guess that's about all I can say on that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byfelds.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I guess I have some concerns about, how this department is growing. I know it's something that we need, and actually I have a brother that's in IT, and he becomes a very important cog in the wheel when things break down in the computer field. So, and I would have had a similar question as Councillor Williams and to CEO on the value that staff receive from that. And I'm reaching out to our own staff because we don't have IT specific people in South Dundas, so we do rely on the counties for that information and support. But maybe in the end, and I can hear the concerns from South Stormont, and do we need to come out with a memorandum of understanding or a set of parameters and how the county works with IT services on the lower tiers? And this is not to disrespect any one of us, but if we all know, excuse me, we all know what's expected and what services we're receiving and what we should be looking after ourselves, then at least the workload is in the right spot, and perhaps the department is funded properly or has the correct staff to do the work as expected or outlined by everyone who uses it.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. That's a good point, Councillor Byvelds. We do have a memorandum of understanding between the county and local municipalities. We had started down the path of a governance committee with the CAOs, and then COVID hit and all that kind of went by the wayside. One, because our department was swamped with requests for remote access, virtual meetings, that kind of thing. And just the fact that the priorities really shifted. And that's why this year, we had our last meeting in February last year of 2020. We were working on a governance system for the IT services. And that's why I think this year it is so important. And all these questions are really good questions. And I think had we got further along with the IT governance, it'd be clear the direction that we want to and need to take. So that a very good point. And I think in the future, we need to do a better job in presenting the value and the direction where we want to take. But we will. That is why we need to focus this year on the governance and the policy, the procedure, and have a clear direction of where we're heading as an IT service.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mike in IT? Not seeing none. Mike, are you looking for some type of direction at this point from council, or you feel that you're comfortable enough to move forward?
Is there any I guess comment on the budget as presented? Yeah, any direction would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just show of hands, is everybody comfortable in regards to the budget that Mike presented this afternoon? And opposed to that? Okay, so it looks like that the majority is there to move forward, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay.
Could I just ask one more question? It's because it is, as people have brought up, it is a bit of a concern to me. Not so much a concern, but I would like to have it a little clearer understanding, like Councillor Byvalds was saying, just to have our heads really wrapped around exactly what is being offered to each municipality and how we're going to not police that. I don't mean anything negative towards it. I'm even sort of inwardly questioning how we would use it. And, you know, there are some times when we could use a month's worth of IT or something, you know, and that would be taken away from everybody else. So that's also why I raised my hand to say I was against the budget as it sits, because not so much the dollar value, I just don't really understand exactly what we're agreeing to going forward. And I'm always a little reticent about joining into something and we say, well, we'll see how it works out, you know, because like then we sort of see how it works out, and what if a bunch of us are not happy with how it works out, or we're overly happy? I mean, the horse has already left the barn, kind of, so to speak. So, I mean, personally, I'd just like to have a little more understanding of what it is that we're agreeing to. The dollars and cents kind of make sense to me, but what is it that we're offering going forward? I mean, are you going to become North Dundas's IT? And I know you're doing very well at being judicious about your time for your department, Mike, but with increased expectations becomes increased time, right? And there's no real mechanism to sort of cut that off other than without council understanding it, other than you saying, okay, well, I've spent enough time, you know, in this location, we should go to another location. But it's a little bit too wonky for me right now, to be honest with you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Gardner, then I have a comment after.
Yeah, I support this in principle, but I'm thinking that before any hiring is done, so we could put it in the budget that those positions would be funded. But I think, and Mike, you've even alluded to it yourself when you say that governance, there seems to be some homework that has to be done before those bodies are in the position. So I definitely, I think that the pandemic has shown that the IT and everything is definitely required. And I do support in principle putting it in the budget, but I think that to Councillor Armstrong's point, I think there's some work that has to be done prior to pulling the trigger on the hiring. I think that whether it's governance, whether it's parameters, whether it's what happens if somebody opts out, that type of thing, I think maybe that would warrant some further exploration.
Okay, so I guess that's the question, I guess, around the table. So the support in principle is there. So Mike, are you comfortable by bringing another report maybe in March meeting when the budget does come back for approval?
Yeah, I was going to suggest if that would be beneficial, I could bring a KIR to the table and lay out the services offered, the uptake of the services, and the future demand as I understand it.
Okay, so I think council is will support it in principle for now, and then bring a report back when we bring the budget back for approval that I would presume in March.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to Planning Division, Mr. Don.
Thank you. Okay, I will be just starting a slideshow here. And is that being displayed okay?
No.
No, okay, take two. There we go, I bet you that's working now.
That one's working, yep, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, again, similar to my previous report, I'm not going to spend too much time on 2020. We'll talk about 2021 expenses in planning and GIS services for SDG. Some interesting statistics that I want to bring to council's attention. So on the revenue side of this budget, we budget based on a three-year rolling average of applications that come into our organization. And this year, I would suggest we are seeing unprecedented volumes of severance applications. That's one of our biggest sources of revenue for this department, or this division, excuse me. On an average year, we're in the 110, you know, that's 110, 120, 120 different applications over the year. Last year, we were at 130 applications, so we certainly broke records since I've been within this division. And as it stands, when I made this report last week or the week prior, like in the last couple of weeks, we're already at 40 applications on the year. So we're seeing quite an unprecedented volume of applications coming into the department, and that is something that we are keeping a very close eye on because it is creating some challenges to be able to. There's only, with essentially 2 staff members managing this aspect of the work, there's only so many hours in the day, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And if we see nice numbers throughout the year, easy to manage, when we're seeing this kind of peak very early on, it does create some challenges. So right now, how we're addressing it right now is we're using some of the contracted planning staff that we do have relationship with to help get through the peak. But it is something that we have to, I think, with the way development is happening across SDG, and we see it with housing prices and the demand for buildings and whatnot, which is a great thing. We may have to, and it's something we're going to be watching and coming back to council with some suggestions on, and we're looking at how we even do deliver this business. So somewhat of a good news story, I guess, in a sense that we're acting as an essential service, but it is something we have to keep an eye on, and we have to be able to address so that we are meeting the demand that's out there. So what the other reserve that we see, or revenue coming in this year, is from a reserve. And that's to complete the natural heritage study. That was something we've been working on for the past couple of years. So on the revenue side, that's a summary of where we're looking for this division. In expenses, we do have, as I mentioned, we have 2 full-time staff that we are budgeting for. We have full 2-time GIS staff as well. So we have the planning staff and then GIS staff. And we have included in the budget, which we normally do, is having 2 student positions. One is a planning student who helps with the administrative side, and one is a GIS student who helps with GIS projects, kind of small GIS projects, giving students who are in that field and the ability to get some experience in the field. Other expenses that we have this year include planning external support. As you may remember, last year when we presented our budget, we had the concept of creating planning as its own department and having a director look after that department. Unfortunately, those plans didn't pan out, and council supported the current structure we have in place, which is myself as a director managing those 2 staff. So we do require external support to help with the complex planning issues that we deal with on a regular basis. So it's really, and we're engaging them on a case-to-case basis. So it's not something that, it's just an open kind of book with them. We do, contact, here's the issue, we need you to resolve it, okay, and then deal with things that way. One other thing I do want to note to council is, we have 2 really great staff members in our planning staff, and one of the things we're working on this year is working on some professional development with those staff members to really try and create some internal capabilities so that we rely less and less, and hopefully can move away from needing external support from a planning consultant. Other expenses this year, some changes to those expenses. We are decreasing our training budget, and of course that's really reflecting the pandemic and the need to, just those training opportunities aren't there right now, or they're being held virtually, so it does result in some cost savings. From the software, data and licenses, of course, with GIS, we have a bunch of contracts and licenses that we are paying for on an annual basis. In the budget this year, we've included a $20,000 contribution to the Eastern Ontario LiDAR project, and that's something that's taking place very similar to the aerial photography that we have done in the past as well, where it's not only just SDG, but it's SDG, Prescott Russell, Leeds Granville, Renfrew, Lanark, all counties across Eastern Ontario who are participating in this project. So right now, similar to some of the other work we've done on we'll call it a pan-regional basis, this one is being led by South Nation, and it's really just direct billing from South Nation to various partners. A lot of local municipalities, I believe, are contributing and participating in this project as well. So counties paying a portion, but also local municipalities are intending to include that in some of their local budgets as well. And just for everybody's information, LiDAR, that is light detection and ranging, and what it is, it has to do with being able to, it's finding elevation, so it's used for development applications, floodplain mapping, some, we could even use it on the transportation side for some pre-surveying elevation work. So there's quite a benefit to having this type of information with us. Another big expense this year, of course, is the ongoing official plan appeal. We do have to budget to be able to support our position through professional consultants, and then legal fees as well. Of course, we are at the staff level, we're trying to minimize that cost to the greatest extent, but we do have to be adequately prepared and funded to be able to continue the ongoing, dispute with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with respect to that official plan appeal. Another expense this year for capital works for planning and GIS is we're finishing up the natural heritage study. Just recently, last week, we had the public meetings on and demonstrating the public maps, and we're wrapping that project up. And so we're going to be seeing the final expense associated with that work. And I'd encourage council, if you weren't able to attend the meeting live, they should be posted online, and take a look at the maps. I think things are coming together very, very well for that, and I look forward to seeing that project to its end. New study that's being proposed this year is a $60,000 study for growth in population. And this is something that the local planners identified as a priority, and it's something that we would at the county level support and lead, just because it does relate to the official plan. And what it is, it's the addressing the dwindling supply of urban lands for commercial and residential development, looking at a 20-year horizon. There's some flexibility with the PPS, which is going to give us the ability to kind of take a look at this study and undertake it. And from an asset management planning and point of view, it's a very important thing to have. And I think of Wellings of Winchester, Dutch Meadows, that South Dundas just had this big debate over the the pumping station and the size of it. So this is the kind of study and the kind of thing that'll help inform some of those discussions. Across SDG, there are multiple different types of, where we see some growth pressures, and where this kind of study and identifying where growth is happening, how we can increase our growth, our land ready for development. In terms of options for this division, a couple options that council can consider, or that we bring forward for council's consideration. One is to reduce the amount of the appeal. Again, that's a challenge for us, because it just depends on how things play out. I can just assure council that we will do our best to try and minimize those expenses to the best of our ability, but we do have a pre-hearing scheduled in April, and hopefully move towards hearings this year, and try hopefully resolve it this year, but who knows the pace that's moving at. One option that council can consider is eliminating the student positions. We didn't fill those student positions last year when we started putting the budget together. Of course, there was a lot of unknowns with the pandemic. And it's not that we don't like to have students and we don't want to encourage that kind of thing, but this year, again, with some challenges locating people and physically spacing people, if council's looking for some savings, certainly that's a good option for council to consider, is just one-time elimination of one or both of those positions. LIDAR funding, again, that could be something that is eliminated, and saving $20,000 on the budget, and reduce or eliminate the growth and population study. So if council wanted to have it, maybe we only start at the latter part of this year and continue it on and carry some money forward in 2022 as an option for council. So with that, I will stop sharing and open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Don. I have a couple of questions from Councillor Byfeld and Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'll first comment on your staffing situation, Ben. I think you and staff and council made the decision not to hire a planner last year because we weren't satisfied with the quality of application. So we are kind of stuck, and you are in a busy year, and I guess if I was looking at this and knowing some of the challenges we are having in South Dundas, I would not dismiss hiring either a very senior planning tech or a planner to deal with more of our more of our files, because we are getting busier. You know, we want to get busier, and it sounds like you're going to get behind. And as you know, the province has tightened up a lot of those timelines that you had time to do before, but now all of a sudden you don't anymore. So I would still keep that in my back pocket and look forward down the road to see, well, maybe we need to go back to where we were and come up with a better solution in that regard. Certainly, if you can hire a student that's going through some training on planning, that would be a good asset to have. My main concern, though, is with the LiDAR project that South Nation has proposed. So I'm not sure where other municipalities are, but South Nation has brought their show to South Dundas, and as much as the request isn't significant, as you know, and maybe some others do know, South Dundas was part and parcel of a LiDAR project earlier on, determine the floodplain area of the St. Lawrence, vis-a-vis the flooding issues that caused that happened in 2017, 2018. They extended it well into our municipality for some reason, and I wasn't part of the council that initiated the study, but the study actually came back and didn't give us any new information. The old OPG floodplain maps are dead spot on in our municipality. So I really question whether we need to go down further with this. I know there's a lot of questions at our council on whether we will continue to support this project. So I can see it within their own floodplain jurisdiction, but to continue on within the counties, cost benefit ratio on that. If we had to pay the whole bill, we wouldn't do it. Of course, they're counting on the feds to pay for 50% of this project, which is a significant amount of money, but and it's mainly to deal with flooding concerns, because that's where they're coming from, the disaster relief funding. But at this time, I'm not prepared to endorse that project from a county level with a lot more information than just saying South Nation wants to do it. The cost.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Williams, then if you have any comments, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my comments are in the vein of Councillor Byveld's with regards to the planner and the fact that, you know, we went to the well looking for a director of planning and weren't successful. But I do have a concern over a lack of resources in that department. I don't see that resolving itself, because it's clearly busier than ever. And so I don't know, you know, when, you know, do you plan on going back and trying to, you know, rehire this position on a sort of every, you know, 6 months or something like that? I don't know. I mean, I know you can't recruit for something constantly, but I don't see the status quo as working out. Either a rethink of the workload for, you know, the county planning department, you know, perhaps devolving some of those responsibilities to the municipalities, or getting the appropriate staffing is the way I see this needing to go. Any comments?
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I'll do the staff one first, and then I'll turn back to the LiDAR. So no, your point's well taken, Councillor Williams. And I think whenever we last presented to council, we thought let's, and I'm going to say go with the status quo for the time being, because there's a significant amount of time and effort and resources that go into the recruitment process. And we had been hard at it. I know our CAO can attest to it, because he was, you know, right there along with it all. And you know, for the amount of time and effort we put into it, you're just being stuck in that unknown is a real challenge. And that's why I was appreciative, you know, council supported, let's just stick with the status quo, let's stick with an external consultant, and let's drive forward for the time being. Let's try and establish ourselves, see where we're going, and then revisit that hierarchy. Because truth be told, as far as I know, and Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the I guess the hierarchy is still kind of on the books, if I may. Like it wasn't something that we actually got rid of. So that the ability to fill the director position and kind of create that whole department is still kind of approved and there. It's just we said we're not doing it for the time being. So, you know, I guess my recommendation in that respect is like let's continue to drive on. But with, you know, coming back to staff, I do want to again reiterate we do have some excellent staff here that work with us, and there's some real opportunity to develop those staff members, and they've expressed an interest as well in developing and growing and kind of moving forward with the progression of their career. So to me, I see that there's great opportunity there, and as we do that, then we start, you know, it's much easier to kind of, I guess, you know, if you've got a more generalist role at the bottom, it's much easier to fill that. So I see that there's the opportunity there. And just for council's information, we are going through kind of like a service delivery. It's not a service delivery review, but rather just a service delivery kind of summary and looking at the services we provide and kind of identifying some of the challenges we have with that. So my hope is that I can come back to council with some information, and you know, I'm glad to hear that there is the support to kind of, you know, bolster that, because I think that we provide a great service. I think we've got great staff here, and I think that there's real opportunity to find maybe kind of internal ways to address some of these shortfalls and the pressures that I described earlier to council. So briefly going back to LiDAR, you know, point well taken with respect to what Councillor Byveld said. There are multiple examples, and I see it in the planning, you know, with the planning work we do, where applicants will come in, it's like, well, they don't have an idea of where, and it is floodplain mapping related, but it's not necessarily South Nation related. So having this LiDAR information available is going to help a multitude of developers across SDG. And one example I'm thinking of right now was near South Mountain in North Dundas, where the applicant had to go and go and do a survey of their property, where if we had this LiDAR information, you know, available for people to use with a simple severance application, we may be able to you know, eliminate some of those steps and those impediments. So although it is a $20,000 expense, I do see the value of it, and I see it even in our work we're doing for County Road 5, doing some hydraulic analysis, because we have to use old maps that we have.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gardner, and then Councillor Wirt.
Yeah, I actually have comments on both of those. I'll start with the staffing thing. One of the things, and this is just a comment, we just heard about an hour ago from Tourism and Economic Development about dating the counties. I think if we've got some of these positions within our respective townships as well as the counties, then that should be worked in, only because that program is going to get a lot of exposure, and it might be something where we put, you know, these opportunities are available, blah, blah, blah. So just something to think of, where we can actually take a tourism initiative and maybe fill some of the hard to fill professional spots that we're having a hard time with. On the LiDAR thing, I think I support what Councillor Byveld is saying. I know for me, and this is not a comment on the good work that South Nation does. I've planted a lot of trees in my life, and I understand the benefit to the community. But I think where it becomes a little bit frustrating, I know for me, is we have a predetermined levy that they determine. Then when we sit at the various granting programs, they're at the granting programs. Then they're coming with the $20,000 LiDAR project, and it just seems like it's a continual project making thing for my thing. And maybe that's just me speaking as a newbie, but you know, I really think the projects that we support have to have a full bang for the buck. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, Ben, that there is a requirement as folks grow, but if we've already gone down the path, especially in South Dundas, and we've seen no return for that investment, it's a tricky thing to keep supporting whenever we feel that we're already supporting that organization. So that's where things become a little bit problematic.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wirt.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, and just a comment, Ben, not pertaining to the previous subject, but The study that we're going to undertake in regards to population growth, I think is really timely. And I would like to see the consultant that we get to handle the education question be involved in that population study, simply so that we get current numbers that may very well help us in another direction we hadn't anticipated. Personally, I think the numbers that we're seeing today have certainly changed dramatically since we went through the last ARC round. And if we had current numbers, I think it could be part of a very compelling argument. So just a comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Landry?
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. No, I'll just in comment with Councillor Byveld and Gardner with respect to LiDAR. I think, like, in the field that I am, LiDAR has great value where developers do get all this of what Ben was mentioning. I'm thinking that it's in conjunction with substation, but at the same time, if we invest at 20, it gives Ben or our department full capacity on this LiDAR. So versus going at it alone, I think it's something that there's value to it. Now I'd like to see what the full project would cost in terms of what we're paying at the 20,000 mark. But it's something, if it is 20,000 on a project that would cost 100, I think it's very beneficial for the counties to have access to the full LiDAR that is coming across all of the SDG. So I do see some value. I understand fully as far as the levies with South Nation and fighting for, but again, what we're looking at here is the LiDAR itself. I would see some support, or I would be prepared to support Ben if he feels that there would be value across SDG for that service.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, and I won't belabor it, and I do want to just reiterate that this is South Nation's the lead. It isn't a South Nation project, but they are the lead who is coordinating everybody, and it is for the entire county. So that, like, Raisin Region watershed, and I believe Raisin Region's participating as well. South Nation's participating through their levy. It's just trying to get all these different partners who are going to benefit from it to the table. But you know, I certainly, whatever council, you know, the direction council wants to take in that, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Ben? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. No, just to jump in on the LiDAR, I've been sitting listening, and I understand. I think I understand everyone's thoughts and views. But when we talk about some of the initiatives and our economic development, and I think a nod of head from Ben, if I'm correct, to think that this would support economic development. It would support our goal of making it easier to invest in SDG for others. It'd be one less hurdle for anyone that wants to come to SDG to overcome, and I think that is one of our initiatives. Is to be blunt about it, is to make it easier to come to SDG and invest, build, set up a business, and I think for $20,000, to Councillor Landry's concern, I have no idea what percentage of the whole $20,000 is. It would be interesting to know that before we go ahead, but I think we should strongly consider this as providing a benefit to anyone that wants to come to SDG to develop. That's my thought on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Don.
I was going to say, and I apologize, Councillor Fraser, if I have the file wrong, but the Civita file is one where, you know, the developer needed to understand some elevations, and you, as North Dundas and the developer, now work together to find a resolution. But, you know, having that information at our fingertips would have helped, you know, before things got, you know, eyes wide open before things had started along that path.
Fraser.
Thank you for reminding me of that. And just for the benefit of all, the Civita project was seemingly simple enough. Just grant what they desired, and a business would increase in size. A business known worldwide would increase. And some of the challenge we face with not knowing certain things, we almost lost the business in North Dundas in SDG in Canada. Essentially, it's a worldwide operation and supporting many agricultural people and agricultural investment. And that LiDAR may very well have sped the process along and created some savings.
Okay, anything else? Not seeing none, we'll move into the Forestry division. Mr. Don.
Just give me a quick second. I gotta reset myself here. Okay. Okay, I trust you can see that and yell at me if you can't. So what we've done this year compared to previous years is we've split out forestry and noxious weed control into its own, well, we'll call it its own budget, its own division, just given the similar kind of nature of the work and the fact that it deals with vegetation control within SDG. So yeah, again, we've talking about county forests, the management of county forests and roadside forestry initiatives, and the work that our weed inspector does under the Noxious Weed Control Act. So that's not the work done as part of the roadside weed spraying. That's an operational right-of-way management issue. So that's covered under transportation. In the 2021 budget, we are holding the noxious weed control budget the same as it was in 2020. It's a complaint-driven expense. 2020, of course, with the pandemic, we saw the number of complaints or calls into that position drop significantly. We received only about 15 calls last year, and so of course we expect that is pandemic related. We are unsure if through the summer of 2021, the pandemic will continue to impact it, but we're continuing to hold the budget based on the historical efforts that were associated with that work. On the forestry side of things, some good news for council's information. Here's a picture in one really cold day in January on a Sunday at the Summerstown Forest. I counted 55 vehicles visiting that site whenever my wife and I were walking in to attend. The numbers that we see in terms of people coming to visit our forests, and particularly the ones where we have these kinds of recreational facilities there, I just think has been fantastic. It's you know, maybe a interesting side effect of the pandemic and the desire for people to kind of get outside and get some, you know, get into some open space and enjoy the natural scenery. We do have from the Friends of the Summerstown trails, they put out a trail counter just to get a sense of how many people were visiting the forest. So you can see those numbers there. You do have to divide it by 2 because they're counted as people go in and as people leave. So you know, we're getting 200, 300 people in the forest on weekends, and I can tell you that, you know, I do go regularly, and those numbers, the types of the amount of people I see parked on the side of the road there is the same every weekend long. So it's something that's it's fantastic to see, and even the numbers prior to the snow starting were up at, you know, 1,700 visits in 1 month into that parking lot in November. So 100+ vehicles a day over the weekends without snow. In terms of the work that we're doing under the forestry side of this division, on the revenue, Rebecca had mentioned previously about the reserve to offset the cost of the Moore family forest. That is done. We have officially purchased that forest, so we will be looking to a nice unveiling later on when the weather turns nicer. We do have some other revenues which are coming in from harvests at the other properties. And for example, the Howard Mitchell property, we're doing a spruce harvest in the very near future. Expenses for forestry, as noted, as I just mentioned, we are spending money for the Moore family forest purchase. We are at the end right now of our operational plan, our 5-year operational plan for harvest within our forest. So we are going to be coming back to council in September to talk about what we're planning for the next 5 years. So some of our costs with respect to forest management are associated with creating that plan, but also the normal work that we do. So actually marking, doing inspections of harvest. This is a picture of Warwick Forest where a harvest just was finished over the last little bit. So just prior to the cleanup, the contractors cleanup before they took their equipment out of the site. So there's a bunch of costs that are associated with that we do pay for on an annual basis. We also have property expenses. So those are just really those general expenses that are associated with our properties. So things like signs, fences, property boundary issues. You know, you see a picture down there of that yellow sign. That's a sign we had to put up this year because there were hawks bothering people at the Warwick Forest on the trail. So giving people a warning or shutting down a trail while they are nesting. Of course, with COVID, we had a bunch of forest signs that we needed to put up just for, you know, the precautionary signs that we had to put up everywhere. This year, one of the big things we're working on is a forest use policy initiative. So we talked back in November, I believe, of last year about trying to identify the right types of activities in the right forests. And that's something, obviously, we have to budget some expenses towards that to be able to get that off the ground and get a policy in place for council. And we're going to be, you know, I'll bring back something to council later in March or in April just to talk about where we're going with that one. And again, trail maintenance and signage expenses that we would have. On the roadside forestry side of things, we are proposing $25,000 in 2021. That's an increase of $5,000 compared to the previous year. Last year, we planted over 500 trees and we tended all of our existing stands that are still needing that tending. You know, we did new sites on County Road 31, County Road 12, County Road 14, so all over across the county, and we're really focusing on hardy types of plants that will, or trees, excuse me, that will help with, you know, drifting and things like that. And we're trying to really find, you know, put them in locations that make sense. And we see the continued success of that. And one of the things we see, of course, too, is those ash trees which continue to die on the roadsides and how that's impacting it and trying to, you know, and that's really why we wanted to increase our efforts there, is really to try and account for some of those ash tree losses that we're removing from the roadsides. Special projects that we're looking at with forestry. The picture that I started the presentation off with at Summerstown Forest just, I guess, reiterates the need that we shouldn't have people parking on the side of the road in the wintertime, particularly if we're plowing. So we've been talking about this project for a couple of years. We've gone through in 2020, we went through the EIS process. So we did an environmental impact study to determine and establish what we'd need to do if we wanted to expand the parking lot. We do have the findings of that study done, and we're looking to actually physically expand that parking lot in 2021. So we're looking for $30,000 there. We're also including $30,000, continuing $30,000 in the Woodlot Advisory Service. We provided grants last year to 32 applicants and then completed an additional 11 site visits. There's a demand for this program, and we want to continue to push it out there. We work closely with Prescott Russell, who offers a very similar program. And what we will continue to do on the expense side for forestry is transfer any revenue we receive from harvests into the land securement reserve, just as a strategy on how to kind of save up for future purchases. In terms of options for council's consideration, we could reduce the roadside forestry expense back to the 2020 level, which will result in $5,000 in savings. We could reduce the forestry special projects. So some of those things I've identified, we can, depending on what council wants to remove, we can remove or add additional funds, or we can increase or decrease the funding to the land securement reserve. So if council wants to put some money into to savings to buy more land, we can, or more forest, we can do that. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'll open that up to any questions or comments. Councillor Byfeld, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. As council knows, I'm probably not the biggest tree hugger on council, but that's okay. I know there's lots of good things going on, and as long as it's done in a reasonable manner, it makes sense. However, I will bring up the roadside tree planting project. I'm a bit challenged with it because I see some challenging situations, namely on 31 at Garlow, where all those saplings have basically died off. And at first I thought they might come back, but when the the brown falls off and all you have is Charlie Brown left, it's game over. So I'm not sure if you have an arrangement with South Nation on any kind of compensation if they fail or what, but you know, that's good money gone that isn't really going to be beneficial. And just a further comment on roadside planting. I know it's an issue where we see we have quote unquote the prairies in parts of our county where there are less trees available to hold snow down, but having driven a chunk of county roads in the last few days on and some of the situations are not avoidable. It's, you know, if the land is higher than the road, you're still going to get drifting. I've seen drifting in big snowbanks even where there are trees. So not saying to stop it, but I think we need to be smart about it. Yes, you got to plant the trees because it's going to be our lifetime to deal with it. But if we plant them and 2 years later they're dead, that investment is gone, and we're spending more money. And I want to make sure that if we're going to do it, we better do it right.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, Mr. Don, in regards to the Forestry Division. So the last one we have left is transportation. My understanding is from Ben, he's going to wrap that up in about 25 to 30 minutes. So maybe we'll take a quick 5-minute break if we can. So it's now 2:33. We'll come back at 2:40 if we can, please.